All right, welcome everybody to CFP Talks episode number 12. And today you can see I am joined by, as always, David Fuchs. I'm joined by my friend Niko Puritz and by Brennan Kurtela. And these are two of our most recent and newly CFPs. What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So you guys work together in a group and passed in November. So I would like to just start off by, can you guys just tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you do, and before we met, how you were kind of studying for the exam or going about the exam. I know you guys kind of had very, very different backgrounds coming in. So Niko, why don't you start us off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you were right at the point where we started working together.
Yeah, for sure. I work in an advisory capacity for a larger firm. I deal with clients, every day with their retirement assets, taxable assets, go over income planning, estate planning, things like that, in more of a high level capacity. I'm just now 4 years in the industry. So I started the CFP through the Dalton program. So I was going through that. I found a few deficiencies that I wasn't a huge fan of, and I knew that I needed a little bit of extra help, and that's really where we crossed paths, and definitely helped a lot.
So tell me a little bit about, you kind of had one of the quicker time frames. You finished the education portion when?
I finished the education component in September, so early said, like right before the deadline for the capstone.
Okay, so you were riding a very, very tight time period there when you came in.
Yeah.
Okay, and Brennan, tell me a little bit about what you do and where you were when we met.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for 7 or 8 years here in the Bay Area, doing advisory business, brokerage business, kind of touching all the same stuff that Niko was touching there. I wanted to become a CFP a little, I think 2 years ago. So I did the education a while ago. Went through, actually took the test on my own, just trying to do it by myself. And wasn't successful out of the gate, but that's inspired me to go out and find someone who could really help me drill down on some of the stuff I was overlooking, because it's all stuff that we've seen on a daily basis in this business. So that led me to you, but it was a longer journey, but I'm happy I'm through it, and I'm excited for what's ahead.
Yeah, so awesome. So you guys both kind of came in two very different positions. Brendan, you had obviously taken the exam before. You had a little bit more time with the material. You've also been in the industry a bit longer. Niko, obviously coming right off his education. We went through in a group format, and Niko, we did some one-on-one sessions as well. Based on where you guys were when we got started and going into the exam, what would you say if you could boil it down? I know this is hard. You could boil it down into one kind of thing that really was the difference maker, the thing that helped you get across the finish line, or the one point of emphasis that really changed the way you either looked at questions or how you did your studying. What would you say that one tenet is? Brendan, why don't you start us off this time?
Yeah, so doing it on my own, it was kind of just take practice quizzes and see what you got, and kind of just, I was really jumbled. So with you, it was very coordinated, knew what to focus on, not do too many questions. I think that was key, is doing it on my own. I would just do too many questions and then I'd be drained. So breaking it into some questions, flashcards, getting sleep, just having that structure leading up to the test. I think that was a difference maker for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Niko?
So like I was talking about, like before we hit the record button.
Yeah.
um,
Very
the
interesting conversation we were having before the call.
so like I hit my rock bottom, so to speak, confidence wise, during our first conversation. Like the preliminary, all right, let's see where you're at. You asked me a few questions, and I was like, sick. Blasted through this educational component. Let's go. And I got every single one wrong. And I was just like, it was one of those things where you're, oh, no. Like the existential dread set in. It was rough. And you laid out a really detailed schedule, like the next day, right? And you said, you know, if you can give me nothing short of emotionless and robotic over the next month, because that is essentially my timeline now. You didn't say you will pass. You said you're gonna be in a better position to pass.
That's right. That's right.
So,
That's right.
but you know, like if you can't give me that, tell me now.
Yeah.
And so, like for me, you know, in a more broad sense, right? Like the material acquisition has never been an issue. The articulation has never been an issue. The execution has never been an issue. It's always been getting to that point to where I can get it done. And so having that structure, having the, you know, essential coaching, right? To be able to, you know, have that presence in my corner, just like, am I all right? Am I good? Like, yeah, all right, cool. Because I learned more in this month by just understanding how to study from you than I did in the entire educational component and part of the review component that I did utilize from Dalton. So like the biggest difference maker was the structure, the support, but also like the no BS, like this is what I need from you. Can you do it?
Yeah.
No? Okay, then this probably isn't for you. Yes, your odds are good. You know what I mean? So that was definitely like my game changer.
Yeah.
I do want to ask Brennan a question really quickly because you mentioned something that Joe and I talk about all the time. And you mentioned that the first time you went through and, you know, were obviously not successful. You mentioned that one thing that you did pretty significantly was answer practice questions and kind of do it that way. Joe and I talk about that all the time, about how a lot of people that are in the industry that go through the exam, that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that they make when they start studying for this particular exam. I'm curious because I did the same thing. I actually failed it the first time I took it too, and I did the same exact thing. And I'm just curious from your perspective, why do you think that's a popular way for people to go about practicing and prepping for this exam, and why that is a downfall for this particular exam compared to taking the Series 7 or the 66 or one of those exams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's popular just because you sign up for, you know, Kaplan or Dalton and they give you this big test bank. And so you're like, all right, cool. If I just do as many of these as possible, I'm going to pass. So, you know, what I realized the difference is, you know, at first it was just jam, but with Joe, he kind of told me, okay, just focus on this. Don't worry about, you know, that subject or that subject. Here's where you're weak. And so, you know, it's so much more helpful having that guidance and that structure. And I forgot what your second question was, but
it was like a lot of people do that. Like why do you think that that's not as successful?
Yeah, well, I think it's just, you know, you don't capture the full concept as well. You know, you get stuck to, you know, reading and then just jumping to an answer that looks right and not really actually thinking about what the question is asking. And so, you know, working with Joe, we got real deep into the concepts. We talked about the concepts, and it allows you to kind of, the light bulb goes off when you read that question or you read that answer and there's a piece to it that doesn't fit. And so, you know, I think just having more conceptual conversations versus just A, B, C, D. You know, sometimes you see the same question, and that doesn't help you if you already know what answer is right. You don't really grasp the concept stuff.
Yeah, I made you guys talk about it.
Exactly.
You know, and if you can talk
Yeah,
about
game
it,
changer.
yeah, and then you can express it. Niko, let's come back to one thing that you said, which was, you know, and I said this to you guys kind of over and over again, especially that last month, because that's when emotions tend to run high. And Brennan, you mentioned, like, I kept on telling you guys, you got to sleep, you got to eat well. You're not allowed to just be like a crazy person pounding Snickers and eating pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning studying. You know, we talked about that over and over again because that is, you know, and I've done it. We've all done it where we're Red Bulls and candy at 2 a.m. while we're studying, but really getting nothing done.
Yeah.
Niko, talk a little bit about, like, you know, I kept on, you know, saying this over and over again in our sessions, like, let's take the emotions out. How do you think that helped? And why do you think that might be important for anybody taking a test?
Yeah. And, you know, if you remember, you were like, I need you to be an emotionless robot. And I was just like, yeah, I have like 30 years of practice at that. I can do that pretty well. So I came in with a distinct advantage. You know what I mean? No, but I was like I was saying before we kicked off recording, like I'm definitely more of the obsessive type in a healthy way. I almost texted you a couple times. No,
self-diagnosed in a healthy way.
Sure. No, but like when I have a goal, like I'm all in. Now the one issue that I have, and you know, being you know, weightlifter and a musician, you know, competitively, etc. Like it's kind of ganging up on yourself, like yelling at yourself, and just ripping you to yourself to shreds is just kind of par for the course. And you know, if I'm practicing like for, you know, hours, etc., I'm yelling at myself over the same measure of music, etc., etc., etc. So like the biggest differentiator here in being emotionless that I hadn't had experience with, you're like, listen, if you get a question wrong, don't down yourself. It's feedback. Take it, move on to the next. If you get the question right, don't stroke your ego. Take it as feedback. Move on to the next. So it was emotionless to the extent of how are we going to create a repeatable process so that when it is time for you to sit down and take that test, you're like, you know, you're like LeBron James after taking an L. Like, oh, we'll watch the film, we'll scratch that, and move on to the next game, and like we're good. That was huge because when I actually took the test, like I told you afterwards when we were on the phone, like when like my calculator had a pretty significant malfunction, and since I was getting the test remotely proctored, I couldn't have scrap paper. So like that, you know, the more kinesthetic kind of like memory component of writing out formulas, I now couldn't do. And I was by the time I got to the last section, I was so mad because I had a few time value of money questions like right in a row where I had to inflate something over a super long period of time, and the units weren't being computed correctly and my calculator wasn't giving me the right info. After I had like checked it by doing something a lot easier over a similar period of time, and I knew the answer was wrong, and so I had to do this by hand, but I couldn't write anything. And after that was done, I was just like, okay, went to the next question, kind of like reverted back to what I had been doing for the entire month. And when I moved on to the next question, if I didn't flag it, which I flagged a few, but when I moved on to the next question, whatever had happened prior was out of my brain. So, you know, that was that kind of emotionless repetition, just kind of robotic kind of best practice. That was huge because like I was running hot at the end of that exam, and like luckily I still pulled it out, but that was a huge component.
And everybody runs hot at the end of that exam.
Oh yeah, and that's a good segue, Niko. Just into, because one thing that Joe, you know, specifically with Joe, that he emphasizes with everybody, and I'm sure you guys have gotten this the past month or the month going into the exam is stressing the fundamentals and kind of as Brennan mentioned earlier when we were talking about the multiple about memorizing Q bank answers that's not how you pass this exam. So I'm just curious. Obviously, Brennan, you went through it one time and then another, and then obviously through all the series exams and Niko, same with you. I'm just curious, going through the process with Joe the month before the exam, how do you think learning the fundamentals of each topic and each module played into your success in passing this exam? And either one of you, I guess we'll start with Brennan.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the fundamentals were new to either of us, I don't think. It was just working through maybe some roadblocks that we had, or at least for me, from my experience in the past, certain time value of money setups, things that I know how to do, but maybe I don't know how to do them quick enough, or I don't, maybe I'm getting lost at one roadblock. So that, was really helpful to go through consistently, leading up to the exam. We touched on everything. The case studies would kind of really, because there's so much content, right? And they could take it any which way. And so Joe's case studies I found really helpful to kind of, push some of that noise out and just focus on some of those fundamentals and kind of just rehash some of them, the calculations, the, policies, the rules, the formulas, the, you name it, was in those case studies. And that kind of really brought the fundamentals to the forefront for me.
Brennan, did you think it was more the process? Because like Niko keeps saying that it was a repeatable process.
Yeah.
Like, you guys were both there. Like there was a lot of what we did was, yes, I had to teach you guys some of the fundamentals. I was reiterating them.
Sure.
But you guys did come in with a pretty good foundation. So it wasn't like I was teaching you from the ground up. Right. Now, obviously there's some things that we had to clean up, but like, was it more so, the translation of that fundamental concept into an answer, or maybe some of the steps, like, I made you guys to draw the timeline 100 times.
Right. The steps, the bond pyramid, some of those things that I took and put on a flashcard to remember, that is stuff that I missed doing it on my own, and just having you, who's been in in this environment for a while, being able to kind of say, hey, don't think so much about how this affects that. Here's the fundamental, here's the steps.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Yeah.
Actually, just so you're talking about, doing time value of money, and kind of Joe taught you in a different way, and the bond calculation, stuff like that, more like real life application. How much of the way you learned how to do some of this stuff going through the process for the exam, do you now apply to your everyday, to basically what you guys do every day? Or was it just for the exam?
I mean, a lot. I mean, it's definitely added confidence to my daily conversations. I think, before it was, I've seen that topic, like ISOs and QSOs, I've seen that, and I work in the Bay Area, so there's a lot of that around, and, it's, being more confident in those conversations today, from the studies with Joe, from the practice we did, the case studies, like I said.
Sick. What about you, Niko?
Definitely allowed my conversations to be able to be more tailored, more nuanced. As I'm sure, much to my detriment here, I can talk for a while. So I mean, like talking to clients has never been an issue. My my arsenal of info and tool and planning tools has never been an issue, but I have noticed a very drastic difference in the terms of the efficacy of my conversations, the more broad-based spectrum of topics that I'm able to more confidently discuss, and then I'm not in the Bay Area, so there's not as much stock option plans or anything like that. But I'm still very confident with my ability to be able to have those conversations. And it's a noticeable difference now as opposed to, call it a few months ago.
Yeah, I got my CFP when I was 24, and my handle on estate got so good that, and I was asking like a lot of like more estate stuff, like, are we supporting parents in the future? Do we have any siblings that we have to worry about? Like, have you guys done a will? And that was such a game changer in that just the client's demeanor when they're like, oh, I have not, I have socks that are older than you. How the fuck do you know that? And you're like, well, these letters actually mean something, which was really cool. And I just remember I had this client that I had been chasing for a while, and I was trying to move in like $500,000. And it was after that conversation that they signed the paperwork. And I knew, I was like, that exam just paid for itself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which was a cool thing.
I had a charitable giving client that did the same thing like a few weeks ago. Unfortunately their child passed, which is always a rough conversation to be a part of, right?
To say the least.
And so his estate planning was super easy in the sense that everything was titled to his wife, and the rest was titled to an organization with his alma mater, right? And so we were talking. It's like, yeah, I don't really need this because like I have this, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, that's all well and good. As far as experience goes on your wife's end, what does that look like? So hypothetically speaking, something, God forbid, happens to you and happens to her, right? What happens then? And he was like, what? And I was like, okay, cool. So we sat down, we had a long conversation. We talked about particularly like geographically where I'm at in South Florida, like what that probate process looks like after her, what titling can fix, but like realistically what trust can fix, et cetera. And we had a really in-depth charitable giving conversation. So that was a conversation that I wouldn't have been able to have. Estate planning is definitely a huge overlooked game changer outside of the CFP world.
I agree. I think that one for me what was for you, David?
What?
In terms of like what topic that like made the difference today?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that I personally also love estate planning as well, because I feel like when you're talking about being a financial planner, that's probably the most important part of that. I mean, retirement income also probably is a lot of people's main priorities, but I think estate planning was a great a topic that kind of changes the game for a lot of people that get the letters, because that adds, anyone can, investments,
right?
That's kind of, everybody does investments. Taxes, there's other professionals for that, obviously. Estate planning kind of brings everything together, especially when you're working with a whole family. And in terms of the actual exam, I always tell people this as well. Those questions for the estate were like, in my mind, as you're going through those are the ones that are usually a paragraph long. And those are the ones where you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and the answer is the final piece. So I always tell people that's the most challenging, but the most rewarding.
I agree with that. I think that's an overlooked. I think also when you can save people money on taxes, they want to like kiss you like you're their first child. They're like, oh my God,
when you can retain that money to the family and keep that away from Uncle Sam and everything like that. So for me, it's almost like, okay, cool. So I won that game.
Yeah. And it's funny because with clients, it was like, if you save them $5,000 on taxes, but if you're like, I'll cut your fees $5,000, they'd be like, cool. If you're like, I save you $5,000 on taxes, like, oh, you're a genius. And you're like,
how did you do this?
How did you do that, you wizard? You little tax wizard. All right. Well, we have a couple minutes left, so let's end here on this notes. If you had to give, now obviously, like always looking back at the process, and a lot of CFP students say this to me, is the process that you put us through was kind of, now looking back, it was like, oh, duh. Like that's probably the way that I should have done it from the beginning. Now that you guys have had, a couple of weeks to reflect a little bit, you've now kind of rejuvenated some of your sleep. You're back in your normal routine a little bit. We also had an accident there right before the exam that almost killed him. We almost had a.
We won't discuss that.
we won't discuss that. But now looking back, somebody in your office, a friend, a colleague, family member, they're going to go embark on this journey. Give them a piece of advice that you wish you knew. Like it's always like the I wish I knew then what I know now type of situation. So what is, I wish I knew then what I knew now type of nugget of wisdom there. This is our segment that we call the golden nugget after the casino in New Jersey.
I would say get someone to work with, to talk with. Like Niko and I, we got on, that last week leading up to the test. For me, I took it a few days before him. We got on video chat, I think, 11 a.m. every day, and went for an hour or two, just going through questions, reading them out loud, talking to each other, figuring out the answer. And
figuring out why we got the answer wrong.
Why we got it wrong. Yeah. Leads you to kind of clean up those last details and have just, two minds are better than one, right? So that is definitely something I would highly advise. I didn't do any of that meeting, the first time. So that was huge. And, you said it yourself, Joe, just kind of getting rested, not overdoing it, eating right, sleeping. I think I went to bed, I got in bed at least at 9 p.m. every night, that last week or two. Yeah. I mean, I can't say I fell asleep right away, but I was in bed and I was, trying to wind down. That definitely helped with the, just the length of the test, because you're in there for, 6 hours and it's grueling. So if you're rested, you're giving yourself a good chance.
So for me, if I were going to give some advice, it's be comfortable hating yourself, like right up front, right? Like it's okay. Understand that I'm serious. Understand that at some point it might take another set of hands to take you away from that and show you that it's not real.
Yeah.
The confidence aspect, you don't have it. It's okay. Fair self-assessment will carry you so much farther than 100% confidence in yourself from day one. You need it, but not at day one, right? So if you're fortunate enough to be able to meet people and obtain some resources that can help you in your quest to find that confidence, right? Definitely lean in on those people, and that's a huge issue. That was a huge issue for me. And like I said, talking to you the first time, like I'm a fucking idiot. Oh my god,
yeah,
I can't believe I don't know this. I'm gonna fail this test. Like, no, because it's never binary. It's never just like oh, I'm gonna, or not binary. I'm never gonna. It's 0 100. That's it. I'm either gonna pass this test with flying colors, or I'm gonna fail, and I'm just gonna go home and drown myself. So that's not the case, generally speaking. So life's somewhere in the middle, and my ability to kind of take a deep breath and really assess where I'm at was huge. And because like I said, Joe, you were like, dude, if you can't give this to me, like it's not gonna work. But if you can do X, Y, and Z exactly as I write it out, you got to be honest with yourself.
Yep.
So if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, it would be to be okay hating myself for the first week while I get adjusted to the process, but understand that it's a process. Understand that the confidence is not going to start right out of the gate. You have to build it. You have to talk about it. You have to see it. You have to action has to click. And when you have confidence in the process, even absent confidence in yourself, the latter will come. because like the injury, two, oh, so 4 days before my exam, Brennan and I got off a practice exam because I'm 3 hours behind. So I was like, all right, cool. We're halfway through 170 questions. I'm gonna go work out. So I did some cardio. I was benching, not touching a weight that was crazy. Didn't have a spot because I was like, all right, cool. Like, I'm
His
not gonna do anything
definition of
crazy right.
his definition of not crazy weight is a crazy weight. It's like, it wasn't crazy. It was 315.
So I hit that's like my normal like 7 rep range. I hit it out of 5 and I was like, I'm gonna go rack it. And so from a full lockout, like I went to rack it and a bar rolled out of my hands and slammed on my chest. So luckily I didn't break anything, but this is important, and I'm going to tie this in. My confidence in myself was obviously a little shaken because now I have this I have to worry about, but my confidence in the process that was, cultivated and implemented with the collaborative effort of Joe, you know what I mean? That was A1, and that still carried me through the exam. So yeah, that's my long-winded golden nugget.
Yeah.
Be confident in the process, and then you'll be confident in yourself.
Yeah, and I really like what you both said because you've mentioned a couple really things that I tell people a lot, and it sometimes takes a little bit to sink in that we need it to be a repeatable process. And the beginning of I think one thing that people don't realize, and I said this to you guys probably, is learning is messy. It's ugly. It's not we all want this beautiful linear app. I get into my app and I just it just doesn't work that way. You really got to get your hands dirty. And that was one thing that I thought you guys did exceptionally well was, Brennan, I think Niko came in about 2 weeks after we had started, and we had an original group and one of the guys dropped out, and then Niko, you came in, and, we started with those case studies, and it was just like, boom, I slapped you with that case study at first and you were like, uh-oh. Yeah. And I just remember the look on your face. You're like, do I need to know everything on this? And I was like, dude, it's a messy process. There's no part of it. And that's where the
Niko, are you following?
The mindless robot, the mindless robot that came in. It was like, because you're going to get so much thrown at you and you kind of just got to be like, okay. And I always relate this. I think this is kind of one of the best things is, you ever see somebody learning how to do a strict pull-up? With a really good coach, they're on the bar and they're like, pull down. They're like, and they're fully extended. They're like, I am. And you're barely breaking their elbow. And you watch somebody do that for a week and every day it's this much more. And then there's that golden day where everything comes together and all of a sudden you do that pull-up. But there's nothing glamorous about it. There's nothing special about that process. Building muscle is the same idea. It's there's nothing glamorous, but when you start getting going, it's a much easier process. And I saw you guys do that where it was oh, this is drudgery for a little while. And that's okay. But that's what learning is. But anyway, we'll end on that now. Yeah.
One last thing I just want to add for advice, kind of going off Niko. Don't get discouraged when you get in the test. For me, the first portion was actually what I thought was the hardest. And that kind of just knocked me down right out of the gate. And just know that I don't know if it's true or not that the first portion is the hardest, but it felt like it was. So, don't get discouraged.
That's really important. Actually, I wanted to ask you guys this. I forgot. I'm glad you said that. How nerve-wracked were you when you hit the submit button?
I said a prayer. I sat there for a second, said a prayer. Yeah, I was.
So like I said, with the calculator and the lack of scrap paper, after the first section, I felt okay. After the second section, felt good. Third section, I was like, all right. Fourth section, I was like, fuck. So I hit the submit button, and I was just like, it's another 4 months. Whatever, man. I'll just get it next time. I won't do this remotely, whatever. And then it was just pass, and I was like,
me get
sure? You sure about that?
Yeah. Let me get out of here before they change your mind.
It's like I can like look behind my screen, like no, that's not how that works. But no, it was definitely a little nerve wracking.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you guys for doing this. I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on getting your CFPs. I'm excited. You know, I say this all the time. You guys are the exact reason that I enjoy teaching. I want to see you guys be the advisors that people are going to, because if you put as much effort into your careers as you did into CFP, our industry's in good shape. So
yeah.
Congratulations.
And I was not held against my will or coerced into saying any of these glowing things about Joe at all. This was free will, 100%.
I'll send you that. I'm going to Venmo you that $100 in just a minute.
No, but I couldn't have done this without you, man. I really appreciate it. Oh, and just because I said this when I'll just put it like way less creepily. I said this when it was not recording. The advantage here, right, is after our last session, right, I still had the few days in between our last session and the actual test date, right? And so a huge like, again, now my chest is like broken at this point, and I'm trying to have some, you know, degree of continuity from last lesson, last session to the exam. Dude, being able to like go on YouTube and just like literally hear you talk, so to speak. So like you and David, right? Like, dude, I literally sat in a diner with like my retirement and investments, like cliff notes, basically just listening to YouTube BS about like actual things, albeit different than from the content, while I was in a diner eating breakfast, you know, my over easy with rye, and yeah, so like being able to actually just like hear, it's super comforting, and it's like as weird as that sounds, but like it definitely keeps you nice and calm, because it's like, oh man, I remember this. All right, cool. So nothing's changing. So huge bonus too, man.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Like we put a lot of work into doing this, and you know, give David a lot of credit, because he comes up with like a lot of our notes, our show notes, and our topics, and kind of keeps this whole thing running together. And that was like the thing that we say to each other every week is, you know, obviously, you know, I'm in the business of getting students and helping people pass CFP. You know, we don't try to hide that, but we really didn't want it to be an advertisement. We wanted to just be like, if I'm taking the exam, this is exactly what I want to listen to. You know, I want to listen to people talk about it, so I feel like I'm actually getting a little something for the exam, you know, that I don't get in the textbook, that I'm not going to get from a formula sheet, that I'm not going to get. It's just that other mental aspect that is the untalked about part, which is, you know, it's hard. It's a grueling couple of months. You know, I don't think anybody who doesn't take it will never truly understand what it feels like to just constantly bang your head against the wall for months and then literally have it come together in the last 2 weeks. It's a tough thing to explain to people. Like, I remember telling my family, and they'd be like, good job. and you're like, seriously, you see what I'm doing here? I'm killing myself. And they're like, awesome. And I'm like, they're like, are you gonna make more money with this? I'm like, I hope.
No, I'm kidding.
But thank you again, guys. Happy Thanksgiving. And looking forward to what you guys do next. And we will definitely ask you to come back on the show again. We'd love to have you.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate you having me. Have a happy Thanksgiving. I got injured for this. I sacrificed my body for this.
That's enough of you.
You're a soldier. You're a soldier, a hero.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye now.